All right, so people will start filtering in and we'll just give it another minute or so. All right, if you're just joining us, we're just going to give it one more minute or so and we will get started. Welcome. All right, looks like we are just about at 4 o'clock and folks have mostly all joined us. So welcome everyone. I'm Liz Perry. I will be your moderator today for our webinar, which is this week, not just the Crow Canyon Weekly webinar, but an event in the Four Corners Lecture Series, which I will say more about in a minute. But before I introduce our speaker today, if you are new to Crow Canyon, we are a nonprofit research and education center here near Mesa Verde in Southwest Colorado, and you can find more information at crowcanyon.org or email or call any of us, and we would be happy to connect with you. We are only available on Zoom today. We're still working on getting our Facebook Live up and running, but at any point during the presentation, go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A section rather than the chat so that they don't get lost and we're able to get to them in the question and answer period of the talk. You can also come and watch this after the fact on our YouTube channel. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can also check out 5 years now of past webinars or so. We'd like to begin with some acknowledgements. Crow Canyon Archaeological Center acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, Diné, and Jicarilla Apache people on whose traditional homelands our campus sits. With the work we're doing at Crow Canyon, we seek to bring light into the darkness of memory that these lands, waters, wildlife, and her descendants hold because of policies of removal, genocide, and displacement. We seek paths that support and align with Indigenous people and communities, and with gratitude, we honor the contributions of present-day Indigenous communities, descendants, and colleagues with whom we partner who help guide our work and our mission. We have a few announcements before we get started. If you are a graduate student, the 2-year Lister Fellowship is up again. You can apply by October 15th. So please do check it out on our website, and you can check it out at this QR code here. If you want to take a step beyond the webinar series and get into some deeper engagement with some of our programs and projects here at Crow Canyon, we've got a 3-day workshop here in the Four Corners region in August. In September, you could join us out on the rapidly shrinking Lake Powell and talk to some experts and Indigenous scholars, as well as in Southern Arizona in November. So please go to our website, check out the QR code, and take a look at some of the programs we have coming up this summer and this fall. We are so close. Thank you all for your generous donations. As we've talked about in previous weeks, we had an appeal that we launched this spring called Growing Minds and Cultivating Futures that is in part intended to replace some of the lost federal funding under our current situation here. And you can find out more about this appeal on the website. And we have had a generous donor step up who is willing to match our donations if we hit the $50,000 mark, and we are so close. So thank you to everyone who has already contributed for helping continue to make our research and education programs still possible here. Coming up, we don't have a webinar on July 10th, but we do next week on July 3rd, The Importance of Information Professionals in Research with Jewel Cummins. And then the webinar is kind of a special event. 2 weeks later on July 17th, some of you who are regulars probably know the amazing Laura Brown at Crow Canyon, amazing filmmaker. You can see at least one of her other films is on our YouTube channel with Ron Martinez, Looking Elk, a Potter. And this is her latest film that was initiated during last year's trip in Glen Canyon with Hopi archaeologist Lyle Belenqua and author Craig Childs. It's going to be absolutely incredible. So please do join us for that film event on July 17th. As always, just a huge thank you to everyone who supports the webinar series, entirely free to all viewers. So many of you donate every time. And a shout out, as always, to the founder of our webinar series, our dear friend and colleague that we lost this year, Taylor Hasbrook, who started our series during the pandemic to bring people together and keep them connected and learning. And we still are today. So thank you to everybody who supports us every week. So today's speaker is particularly special because this is on behalf of the local Four Corners lecture series, which you can actually find on Facebook. They've got an amazing Facebook page. The theme this year is Voices of the Greater Southwest. The Four Corners lecture series has both webinar hosted lectures such as this one and in-person lectures. It's really an amazing lecture series in the spring, summer, and fall. So please do check out all of the presenters in the series. And without further ado, today's speaker in the lecture series is Marilyn Martorano, who's a very experienced professional archaeologist who's been working in the field for over 45 years, also is the owner and operator of a cultural resources management company in Longmont, Colorado. She is a Colorado native, born, raised, educated at Adams State and Colorado State Universities for her undergraduate and graduate degrees. Her research interests include culturally modified trees, the archaeology of early Hispano settlements, and the Old Spanish National Historic Trail, and the lithophones that she will be discussing today. Marilyn has received many awards for her work, including the Colorado State Archaeologist Award, and is a 3-time recipient of History Colorado's Stephen H. Hart Award for her different research projects. Welcome, Marilyn. We're so excited to have you with us today.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Hopefully.
Yes. Yep, we can hear you.
Okay,
And
thank you.
perfect.
Okay, thank you very much, Liz. I appreciate the introduction, and I'll go ahead and get started with this presentation. Thank you. Many years ago, we identified a number of unique and interesting shaped groundstone artifacts in the museum collections at Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve, and from other areas in the San Luis Valley in southern Colorado. Most of you are probably familiar with this area, but if not, this map shows you where the San Luis Valley is located and its relationship to Great Sand Dunes. The artifacts we were examining are very long, carefully shaped through pecking and grinding, and made from stone. For example, the one shown on the right is over 2 feet long and weighs 9 pounds. Some had been referred to in writing or labeled in museum collections or displays as pestles, roller monos, kneading stones, digging tools, hideworking tools, or various types of axes. Originally, we thought that most of these artifacts from Great Sand Dunes must be some sort of large grinding tool like a pestle that was used to crush and grind in an up and down or circular motion. You can see examples in the photos on the left. You may have one of these in your kitchen even. Or we thought they were possibly some type of long mono, the hand grinding stone used with a metate, as shown on the right. But after preliminary analysis, we realized they didn't have the wear patterns on them if used primarily to crush and grind. Many were also so large, heavy, and carefully shaped, it didn't seem to make sense that they were created only for a simple utilitarian purpose. So the function remained a mystery, and we put them back in the museum drawers for a number of years. Then a few years ago, a colleague of mine sent me a YouTube video of a French researcher, Eric Gonthier, you can see his photo here, who had found numerous similar artifacts from Africa in a collection in the Museum of Man in Paris. These artifacts had been collected by French soldiers in the Sahara Desert in the early 1900s. Those museum researchers didn't know what the artifacts had been used for until Mr. Gonthier, who was a jeweler, happened to tap on them, and he realized they were lithophones. So what are lithophones? Litho is Greek for stone, and phone means sound. So a lithophone is a musical instrument consisting of a purposely selected rock, often formally shaped, that is tapped or rubbed with friction to produce musical notes. After seeing the video of Mr. Gonthier, I was skeptical because no archaeologist in Colorado had ever mentioned considering sound as a function for groundstone artifacts. But I thought maybe I should at least try to play some of the artifacts from Great Sand Dunes. One of my daughters is a percussionist, so I got a couple of her mallets out and tapped on one of the artifacts, and amazingly, it produced musical sounds. And I thought perhaps I'm the first person to hear these sounds in thousands of years. And I'll just have to say, when I heard them play those sounds, it made the hair on my arm stand up. After doing a lot of research, I realized that lithophones are not really some new unknown type of artifact. They're actually well known and found throughout the world, including Europe, the Far East, Africa, the South Seas, South America, China, and Vietnam, to name a few places. And some have been dated to 5,000 to 6,000 years old or older. There are two basic types of lithophones, stationary and portable. Examples of stationary lithophones are shown here, including stalactite lithophones from caves in Africa, shown in the upper left photo there, which show evidence of use wear from being played. And also large boulders found in various parts of the world, like the ones shown from Africa and Scotland in these photos. The indentations that you can see, the little cup marks, actually play different notes when they're tapped on. In the upper left photo is an example of one of many large stationary boulder lithophones in Arizona referred to as bell rocks. These are associated with numerous flower petroglyphs or pecked rock art, and the yellow arrow there points to the location where the rocks were struck to make sounds. In the upper right photo, there's an example of a large stationary but positioned lithophone from Azerbaijan. And the woman who sent me this photo said she heard that large rock there being played with the two rocks sitting on top of it, and that it sounded like a huge bell. In the lower two photos, there are two places in the US that exhibit stationary boulders with acoustical properties. One is in Pennsylvania, called the Ringing Rocks Park, and another is in Montana called the Ringing Rocks, and it's located on BLM land. You can actually go to these two locations with your rock hammer and play the boulders. And if you want to hear these boulders being played without going there, you can just do a Google search for ringing rocks. As you can see in these photos, portable lithophones are found around the world as well. Some are made of unmodified or minimally modified rock, and others are highly modified. Portable lithophones were played in different ways. They could be suspended vertically. You can see examples of lithophones in Ecuador in the upper left photo. Others were suspended horizontally, like the examples from Ethiopia shown in the center and on the upper right. Or the highly modified ones made from jade from South Korea and China shown in the bottom photos. Other portable suspended lithophones include bell stones from Kauai and other Hawaiian islands shown on the left. and kiva bells, which are a type of lithophone made from unmodified or minimally modified stones, shown in the photo on the right. They are found in pueblos in the southwestern US and were also reportedly often suspended and played vertically. The cache of ringing stones shown in the bottom photo there were found in a subfloor deposit of a late dating pueblo site in New Mexico. Other portable lithophones were, and actually still are played today, horizontally like a xylophone, like the one still played in Vietnam, shown in the upper left photo there. And you can see a video online of this woman playing these lithophones, and it's pretty amazing. They could also be played upright like the ancient lithophones found in situ in Vietnam, shown in the lower photo on the left there, or on the ground like the stones played in Togo, shown in the right two photos. Some other types of portable lithophones include very large flaked stone lithophones from Belize, shown in the photo on the left. These were shaped by flaking rather than grinding or pecking, but you can see how big they are just by the person's hand there. Those must be amazing to hear. And on the right is a photo of a group of flake stone artifacts found in a cache or group together in Labrador, and they have been interpreted as lithophones as well. Other very large slab lithophones from Cambodia are shown in the photo on the left. An article was written in 2013 in a peer-reviewed archaeological journal that some of you are probably familiar with, American Antiquity, and describes several portable cylindrical lithophones found in New England, shown in the photo on the right. The author of this article, Duncan Caldwell, noted that lithophones could be a new class of artifacts in most of North America. And as far as I know, no lithophones have ever been identified in Colorado until now. In 2016, with the support of the Park Service, I wrote a grant through the Friends of the Dunes, and we received a History Colorado State Historical Fund Archaeological grant to study the potential lithophones from Great Sand Dunes and the San Luis Valley. I chose a sample of 22 potential lithophones of various sizes and shapes. You can see them lined up here. Several are fragments and others have been broken and glued. For the complete artifacts, the length varied from 9 inches to just over 2 feet. So the 2-footers are shown on the left there. There's much less variation in width, ranging from 2 to 3 inches. Overall, the body shape really varied from almost perfectly rounded or cylindrical to a flattened oval shape in cross-section. The ends are highly varied in shape, and you can see those here. Some are beveled, some are rounded, slightly flattened, cone shape, or pointed, and they often vary from one end to the other on a single artifact. The weight of the complete artifacts that I was studying for the grant ranges from about 2 pounds to 10 pounds. The material types appear to primarily be volcanic and metamorphic rocks such as granites, basalts, andesites, schists, and other known materials for lithophones include petrified wood and phonolite. For our grant, each of the artifacts were described in detail and extensively photographed to help us understand how they were made, why they may have been shaped certain ways, and how they may have been played. For example, I took top and side view photos of each lithophone, and you can see those 2 photos on the top here. This particular lithophone is thin and undulating in side view and is a flattened oval in cross section. We don't really know if the undulating shape is related to the original rock form or if it was intentionally shaped that way for sound or for some other purpose. It's over 2 feet long and weighs 6 pounds. And you can see, especially in that top photo there, it's covered with hundreds and hundreds of small peck marks from being carefully shaped. One of the ends is rounded and the other end comes to a slight point, which is pretty typical of many of the artifacts that we studied. This lithophone plays, for musician types, plays an A sharp and a D when tapped, and it's also really resonant with friction. So if you run a mallet across the surface, it really makes an interesting sound. This is another example of a lithophone. This one is over 2 feet long and weighs over 9 pounds. It's almost round in cross section, but in side view, the second photo from the top, it's slightly curved and tapered toward one end. Lithophone researchers have suggested that the longer rounded lithophones like this one may have intentionally been curved to help stabilize them when playing across the lap or legs. This lithophone has been finely shaped by pecking. All those little white dots that you see there are peck marks. It also plays two distinct notes when tapped, an F sharp and a G sharp, and it's resonant with friction as well. A few of the lithophones have straight body forms, but most are curved or undulating in overall form from a side view. You can see examples of these curved and undulating body forms in the upper three photos shown here, and a basically straight body form is shown in the lower photo. The photo on the left shows examples of the many hundreds of peck marks that I was talking about that are on the bodies of most of the lithophones, suggesting they were carefully and deliberately shaped. What were they using to create these very small peck marks in this very hard stone? Possibly quartz crystal or something like that. We don't really know. But if you've ever tried shaping granite without modern metal tools, it makes you really appreciate the amazing workmanship and skill it must have taken to create these ancient artifacts, because you'd have to hit them pretty hard to make and shape them. But if you hit them too hard, of course, they will break. So they obviously knew what they were doing. The artifact shown on the right has what appears to be a residue, possibly ochre, on the surface near one end. Ochre is a yellow, orange, or red natural pigment that is often utilized prehistorically for ceremonial or ritual purposes. Variations of the surfaces of the lithophones include most that have been pecked and ground into an even surface. A few, like the one shown in the upper photo here, have been pecked, but the surface was left roughened, possibly to make it more resonant when played with friction. And this one, when you rub a mallet across it, it really makes a loud kind of rumbling sound. The artifact in the lower photo on the right there exhibits an oval-shaped indented area on the body with numerous striations parallel to the length of the body. Possibly these are marks related to how it was played with a hard mallet like a rock. The lithophone in the lower left photo exhibits several distinct impact marks, you can see by the yellow arrow there, that could have been created by striking it with a hard mallet like another rock when it was being played. Other lithophones show evidence of being highly polished, like this one. It's not known if this was for aesthetic purposes or may have helped to create a more resonant or specific sound quality. We've also recently found two lithophones that have peck designs on the body. On the left, you can see two of the 5 sets of zigzag lines along the length of the body of this artifact. On the right, the lithophone exhibits 3 pecked angled lines and 2 straight lines that extend around the entire lithophone. We don't know the purpose of these lines. They could have possibly been markings of certain individuals or groups, or perhaps some markings had ceremonial purposes. So how do lithophones make sounds? The sound travels through a lithophone as sound waves when they're tapped. It's all based on the physics of sound and how it travels through various materials. The sound waves travel in 2 curves shown by the red arrows that cross each other twice when the lithophone is tapped. Where the sound waves cross, shown by the yellow arrows on the left, are called the acoustical nodes or dull zones, and these are the only 2 spots where they can be held, suspended, or laid on a rope or another material without muffling the sound. These nodes are at a point about 25% of the total length from each end. It's the same concept as a modern marimba. You can see the picture there. The marimba pieces are also attached at these nodes or dull zones. One of the grant tasks was to conduct an acoustical analysis of each lithophone using software that identifies and records the sound characteristics. We use several software apps that record the note, octave, decibel, and hertz of each sound produced when the lithophone is tapped. Each lithophone produces at least 2 sounds, one on the top and bottom surfaces and one on the lateral edges. Most produce 2 different notes unless they are very flattened in shape. The notes produced by a single lithophone varied from those that play the same note in the same octave, the same note but different octaves, 1/2 to 2 steps apart, and those that play multiple notes and multiple octaves depending on where they're tapped. The sounds produced by the lithophones are similar to metal bells, glass crystal, a wood marimba, or a metal xylophone. In general, the longer lithophones play a lower note, while the shorter ones play higher notes, similar to the high and low notes produced by a modern xylophone or marimba. They can also be played using friction, as I mentioned, or rubbing along the surface. Not all rocks produce musical sounds, so if you think you have some lithophones in your landscaping, you could get lucky and have some, but it depends on the type of rock and the density of the material, as well as the shape, length, and width of the artifact. For example, rocks like sandstone do not produce musical notes because the material is not dense enough, but others like basalt, schist, granite, gneiss, and petrified wood can produce musical sounds. Artifacts with ends that are broken off or shaped straight across or are slightly bulbous on the ends, like pestles, generally do not make good acoustical sounds. Most portable lithophones are also at least 4.5 times longer than they are wide to make the best sounds. To test the artifacts, I used natural materials for mallets that would have been available to prehistoric folks, including rock, bone, wood, and antler. All of these natural mallets, except for some of the softer woods, produced good sounds, but the harder the mallet, the better the sound that was produced. I use modern composite mallets, you can see in the photos here, used to play xylophones today. And the reason is they're hard enough to make a good sound, but they won't make new marks on the artifacts. I tried playing the artifacts in different positions shown here by holding or suspending them, or laying them on different materials or body parts on their acoustical nodes and dull zones. The 22 artifacts that I studied played a minimum of 57 notes, or an average of more than 2 notes each. What's really interesting is that over half of the notes produced are pentatonic for you musician types out there. Those are the notes played by the black keys on a piano. Pentatonic scales in various forms are the most commonly used tonal structure found in music all over the world. So it's really fascinating to me that many of these seemingly simple rock instruments have a tonal structure that is used in music of virtually every worldwide civilization. I have a couple of real short videos playing lithophones to demonstrate a few things. And so this is the first one. This is a video that is showing playing with various types of mallets.
Composite mallet, bone, rock, antler,
Okay, this short video shows a 2-foot long lithophone being played on the top and side surfaces. And this video, I showed a picture of this before of this artifact. It's very highly polished and it makes a really ringing sound. And so when you play on the top, it plays one note. And then when it's played on the side, it plays a totally different note. This is one that was found in a museum, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, in the north end of the San Luis Valley. It was labeled as a kneading stone, and I was able to test it and was really surprised at how amazing the sound is. And this one is interesting. It's a lithophone that's being tapped while it's rolled. And what it shows you is if you listen carefully, it plays two different notes, but then as you're tapping it, it'll play both of the notes together. So see if you can hear that. This is a future project to figure out rock source areas for the lithophones found at Great Sand Dunes in the San Luis Valley. But we do have a couple potential ideas about sources that could have been used. The long columnar volcanic rocks that you can see on the upper left there are from the western side of the San Luis Valley. They're about 1.5 feet long and make musical sounds when tapped, even though they're unmodified. These types of rocks could have been played unmodified, like the lithophones from Ethiopia shown on the upper right, or they may have been significantly modified and pecked and ground and shaped like the lithophones that we studied from great sand dunes. The rocks found in stream deposits shown on the lower left photo there are from the northern portion of the San Luis Valley. They were found by a local resident and a musician who noticed when he was digging fence post holes that certain rocks would hit each other and make musical sounds. He didn't know about lithophones, but he called these rocks his singing stones, and he's collected them for over several decades. These rocks are very similar to described kiva bells that were often made from unmodified or minimally modified stones and found in Pueblo sites dating to post AD 1300. These kiva bells are definitely different in appearance from the highly modified lithophones from the San Luis Valley, but they make sounds in a similar way. One of the most common questions I get is, how did ancient peoples figure out lithophones? They didn't take physics, geology, or music classes, so how did it happen? I think this is a great question, but after I thought about it, I realized it is really no surprise that ancient folks figured this out thousands of years ago. When you think about how these people lived, they were part of their environment. They were in it every day of their lives. They didn't just go camping and hiking on weekends like we do. They intimately knew the plants, animals, rocks, and geography that surrounded them. They knew the sounds of nature and what they meant. And also because they utilized stone for many types of tools, such as arrow points, grinding stones, etc., it's likely they were very aware of where different types of rocks were located along their seasonal journeys. So to me, it wouldn't be surprised that a musician type among them recognized a beautiful sound when they were obtaining or shaping stone for another purpose, and the idea of lithophones was begun. A great example that I think made sense came to me when I was reading this book that you see the cover of on the left, The Life-Giving Stone. It's about Maya people today in remote areas of Guatemala who still now hand quarry and create manos and metates. Their manos are elongated and look very similar to lithophones. You can see the mano with the yellow arrow there being pointed out, and it does look like a lithophone. What's especially interesting is that after they make the rough cut mono that you can see in the lower right photo there, before they spend time to do the final shaping, they tap on each rock piece and listen to the sound. If it makes a certain sound, they keep it. And if it makes another sound, they toss it because it is deemed to have internal flaws and not worth spending any more time shaping. In other words, it would probably break. Perhaps lithophones were first created when certain rocks were tapped for other purposes like this and made a beautiful ringing sound. These are just some ideas, but I think it shows that ancient people in the past were well aware of sound and that it had multiple meanings in their lives, just like ours. This is the percussionist in the San Luis Valley that I mentioned earlier, who had recently discovered natural lithophones, or what he calls singing stones. Jeff told me that it was probably only 1 in 1,000 rocks that had acoustical properties. I think this recent inadvertent discovery of natural lithophones is just another example to support the idea that native peoples long ago likely discovered that certain rocks made musical sounds, and they utilized this knowledge to create music and to include it as an important part of their culture. By the way, if you want to hear these natural lithophones being played, Jeff often gigs with them when he plays in Salida, so you might want to make a trip to Salida. We've learned a lot about these unique groundstone artifacts, but more work is needed to fully understand their significance. And we have many remaining questions, and that's the way science and archaeology should be. How were they used by hunter-gatherers versus sedentary people like those who lived in pueblos in the Southwest? How far back in time do they go here in Colorado and North America? Was their use related to ritual or ceremony or other purposes? How and where were they made and played? What are the source areas for the rock? Are there quarry sites for lithophones that still could be found today? What is the geographical extent of their use? And what can the sounds produced by lithophones tell us about the cultures of the people who made them? I also think it's likely that other lithophones may exist in collections, museums, or have been found in archaeological contexts and haven't been considered for their musical properties. As examples, in the left photo, there are 4 of a group of 12 groundstone artifacts found in the 1950s in Arizona by a well-known Colorado archaeologist, Dr. Joe Ben Wheat. At that time, their function was not determined, but they're visually similar to lithophones and would be worth testing. If they are lithophones, a musical analysis of a group like this would be very interesting to be able to understand the musical notes and scales chosen for a group of lithophones. Also, I think that other types of groundstone artifacts could be lithophones. The 2 artifacts shown on the right have been described by archaeologists as a celt and adze, thought to be used for cutting and chopping, but they also produce musical sounds. You heard the one that's shown on the left there, how musical that was. They sound like metal bells, suggesting they could have either been multi-purpose tools or perhaps they were actually only musical instruments. The artifact in these 2 photos is in the Saguache Museum. This is the other one that I played. It's in the north end of the San Luis Valley. It was labeled as a kneading stone, and it took me 10 years from the first time I saw it to convince the museum folks to allow me to temporarily remove this artifact from the case and test it for sound. But when I was finally able to gently tap on it, the sounds it produced were amazing, like a metal bell. So this one was labeled as something else, and it's actually an amazing lithophone. I know there are other museums in Colorado and throughout the Western US that may have lithophones but are not aware of their function. One of the big questions is how and where were these lithophones played in the past? Were they usually only played individually, or were they sometimes brought together by individuals and played together as a group? In other words, did they meet and have the first hard rock concerts? I don't know. Or were their groups of lithophones actually made specifically to be played together, similar to a xylophone? This newspaper article, printed in 1953, discusses a find of kiva bells found together at a pueblo site in New Mexico. Not only is this interesting that a set of lithophones would have been made to play together, but the notes that these play would be really interesting to help us understand the scales that were chosen for this musical instrument. Knowing the musical sounds of these lithophones may help us to understand the cultural traditions and possibly even give us clues to the geographic origins of the people who played them. This next information was just given to me recently, and I find it really intriguing. These 2 upright artifacts in this photo are labeled as stela, found in a looter's pit on the top of the Sun Pyramid at Teotihuacan in Mexico. They're made of a green schist, a material known for its acoustical properties. The larger of the 2 weighs more than 2,000 pounds. As a comparison, the heaviest lithophone I've studied weighs just over 10. Although the function of these massive artifacts was described as unknown in this particular exhibit, based on their physical similarities to smaller lithophones, I think there is a good possibility that their function was for sound production. And it would be amazing to try and hear them because they're so huge. These flakestone artifacts are often referred to as turkey tail points. You may have seen photos of these before. They're found primarily in the northeastern US. A number of these artifacts have been found in groups or caches, and many researchers have questioned their function as cutting tools or spearheads due to the very small and basically non-useful hafting notches shown by the yellow arrows there. An engineer who was working with a lithophone researcher has suggested that the small notches make more sense for suspension rather than hafting for a handle. That is, suspending them would allow the artifacts to be rung as lithophones. I recently gave a talk to the New England Antiquities Association, and I mentioned these artifacts as potential lithophones, and one of the members sent a video of himself test playing a turkey tail artifact, and it sounded like a metal bell. So these are artifacts that are just one more example of why I think it's important to reconsider the function of a number of different types of artifacts where sound has not been considered. Here are a couple more. You may have seen chamahillas shown on the left there. It's an example of an artifact found in the southwestern US. It's often labeled as a ceremonial hoe or an artifact of an unknown function. It's usually beautifully crafted and often made of a silt stone that is known to have musical properties. The notches are often assumed to be for hafting of an artifact, but again, they also could possibly be for suspending it to play it as a lithophone. On the right are two examples of what are called jadeite axes. They were quarried from the Italian Alps, and these artifacts have been found all over Europe dating back to as early as 6,000 years ago. In describing the function of these artifacts, I've never seen a mention that these may have musical properties, but I believe that both of these artifact types could actually be lithophones and are worthy of testing for sound. In the upper photo here is in the red rectangle, there's a lithophone. I like to call it the mother of all lithophones. It's over 4 feet long and was reportedly found with the mammoth skull shown behind it on the table. This artifact and the smaller one next to it are located in a local museum in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. Could this possibly mean that lithophones were utilized by North America's first occupants, perhaps over 12,000 years ago? In the lower photo, there's a very long granite lithophone that was collected in Arizona in 1910. The current owner realized it had musical properties years ago by just moving it around. He could hear it, but he didn't know anything about lithophones until recently. So this is another reason I'm trying to get the information out about lithophones to the general public, as well as to archaeologists, because I think there are many more lithophones out there that are simply unidentified. Although we have many remaining questions, studying these lithophones has really helped me to feel a connection to people who lived in the past, because music is an expression of all humanity. Music is considered the universal language between all cultures, and to me, that includes both past and present cultures. Music is important in every culture around the world today, including ours, and I think it should be no surprise that sound and music were likely important in the distant past as well. The fact that ancient folks were creating complex musical instruments from stone has important implications to me. That past cultures, even hunters and gatherers from thousands of years ago, did not just live to survive. They wanted meaning in their lives just like us, and they were willing to spend time and effort to create music with lithophones as a significant part of their culture. If you're interested in knowing more about how to identify and analyze lithophones, I wrote a chapter in this book on archaeoacoustics that was just published about 6 months ago. And it basically explains how to identify and analyze portable lithophones using Great Sand Dunes as an example. Okay, that's it. I'd like to thank the many people and organizations, especially History Colorado State Historical Fund and Friends of the Dunes, that help support the work to understand these lithophones. And also, I'd like to thank Liz and Ben from Crow Canyon Archaeological Center who have allowed me to give this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marilyn. Just fascinating, really, really interesting work. And I'm going to jump right to questions because we've had them coming in throughout.
Oh, great.
So one of the first ones that came in while you were initiating your talk is, do you know anything about the time period associated with the stones in the San Luis Valley?
Great question. That's something we'd really like to figure out. Most of the artifacts that were in the museum were picked up by collectors, and so we don't have archaeological context in order to know what the date is. We do have one that was found in a datable context. The date was about 6,000 years ago for that one. And we're hoping to find more that are in a context that we can date. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly just gives the impression that this may span a very long period of
Yeah.
human occupation here. Really cool. So a couple of questions from one of our regular listeners and local artist that I want to ask. Around the multi-tonality. She had asked early on in your presentation, how can one stone have two tones? And then later on, you showed. We got to hear them ourselves, and she observed that the two tones together was sort of evocative of singing bowls with different metal tone signatures. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that multi-tonality.
Well, that's what's really interesting to me is, well, first of all, the different notes they play. And I think the people who created the lithophones created certain notes that they wanted by changing the length and also probably changing the thickness of them. And so, and the rock type, of course, makes a difference too. And it's just fascinating. Like when I was rolling that one, you could hear both notes. So it plays a different note on one side and the other side. And that's because of the thickness of the artifact. And when you're tapping on it, it's all based on the physics of sound. So I had to learn about that, although I'm not an expert at it. But when you roll it like that, it ends up playing one note, then it plays a mixture of that note and the next note together. And so you get those real interesting sounds, which sometimes to us sound kind of harsh. But if you listen to music around the world, people listen to different kinds of notes combined together, and they do that on purpose. So that's probably what happened with these lithophones, I think.
Yeah, wow, really, really cool. Makes sense. Um, I'm gonna group a couple questions kind of around the methods that you were using when you showed the lithophones laid out and the different machinery. Someone had asked about what was the purpose of the ropes that were underneath the lithophones, and then someone else had asked about the apps, and the apparatus that you were using to track the hertz and the notes. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that process for us.
Sure. Like I showed in that one slide, you can hold them up and play them. You can suspend them, but they always have to be on the nodes. You can't hold the center of it or it'll muffle the sound. And so when I was testing these, I found that laying them on a rope on those acoustical nodes or those dull zones was the easiest way to play them and not worry about dropping them. Because, I didn't want to break them.
Right.
So that was that. What was the other question?
Oh,
You had?
the applications that you're using to
Oh,
determine the
yes.
hertz and sound notes. Yeah.
I just got some free apps. Anyone can get those. And they're just musical apps. You can just search for those online. And I tried a couple different musical apps, and it's great because you just download it. And then if you have a potential lithophone, you can tap on it and it'll tell you what note it's playing. It'll tell you the hertz and all the information about the sound. And so that really helped us out because we wanted to do that and we had a lot of artifacts to test. So an app is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, we had a question. Now it sounds like, the provenience can be a little iffy on some of these, but or have there been, someone asks how many lithophones came from a single site, or maybe were there some collections and some assemblages of many lithophones that you've encountered?
Not that I have encountered, but that one slide showed a group of, I think it was 20 some that came from a pueblo. And of course, they were all different lengths, so they probably played different notes. And one interesting thing about the lithophones that were found around Great Sand Dunes is many of them were found upright in the sand. And they may have been played that way, or my guess is they were left that way. They were cached, and people would come back and they'd be there. If you lie something down in the sand and you come back and you think you'll find it, you won't find it because the wind blows and it'll cover it up. And so that's one thing we found. We don't know exactly why they were putting them upright, but the ones we have heard about were found individually. Yeah.
Fantastic. So a bunch of questions, at least 3 or 4 questions, who are curious about if there's been any feedback from descendant communities, if there's ethnographic information, if there's been any kind of consultation and discussions, and what those views might be.
Yes, great questions, because for the ones that were actually found within Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve, of course, the park does consultation on anything like that. And they consult with, I think, 13 different tribal groups. And we have showed them the lithophones over the years. And we found a number of groups didn't know anything about them. They didn't know what they were. Other groups have said, yes, they know about them, but sometimes you don't always get shared information. Hopefully someday we'll get a little bit more communication and sharing of that. So we try to be very mindful of that when we're playing them, in case somebody isn't comfortable with that.
Thank you. We've 2 separate people have brought up the Phoenix Musical Instrument Museum,
Oh,
and we're
yes.
wondering if there are any lithophones there, or if you'd been
Yeah.
there.
I have not been there, and people keep telling me to go. So I was thinking maybe over the winter, that would be a great place to head to. So if anybody has gone and you've seen lithophones, please let me know. I'd like to go anyway and just talk to them, but sounds like a
Yeah,
great place.
yeah, definitely a lot of recommendations for that. And speaking of kind of references, one of our listeners asked if you're familiar with the work of Janine Hernbrode in Arizona with singing stones that have a tone when you walk on them.
Well, that's interesting. I've heard that name. I'm wondering if they are big boulders, kind of like the ones at Ringing Rocks Park. I know there's some in Arizona, where you can tap on them, and they're just big boulders that are sitting out on a hill with some petroglyphs. And so that name
Oh,
sounds
wow.
familiar, but I've never heard that you can walk on them. But sure, why not?
Someone asks, has any kind of mallet ever been found near lithophones?
That is such a great question. I'd love to find a bone mallet or something, but a lot of the lithophones end up showing up on the surface. And of course, the rock is preserved. That's why it'd be nice to find something buried. And perhaps you could find the original mallet next to it. it probably makes sense that they left a mallet with it. Yeah.
No, and probably many ancient belongings that have been interpreted as something else that certainly
Yes.
by
I mean, there
archaeologists.
could have been a little rock. I mean, you don't need a big rock to play a lithophone. You can use a small pebble, that's this big.
Right.
And
Right.
so I can just see, us archaeologists just blowing that up, not thinking about it, in other words. But
Yeah.
now I would, but
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Like you said, that's
yeah,
science.
good question though.
A couple of people now intrigued about what might be in museum collections. This is more of a comment that I wanted to read that just says, I'm the former curator of University of Montana's anthropological collection, and the collection contains several similar objects to the lithophones you're presenting. We never considered they might be lithophones, but now I'm going to share your presentation with the new curator. Thank
Yay.
you. So that's really cool.
That
And
makes
then
me
someone
happy.
else asked if you had been able to peruse for lithophones at the Edge of the Cedars Museum in Blanding.
No, I've seen lots of postings by Edge of Cedars and I'd love to go there. I bet they have some.
I'm sure
Yeah.
they do. Our friend and colleague Jonathan Till is there, and I'm sure he would love to love to engage with you on that.
That'd be great.
Oh, well, we'll leave this kind of a funny comment from someone that says the blues is based on the pentatonic scale, so maybe
And
the lithophone
yes,
players had the blues.
that's a great comment though, because the pentatonic scales, are found all over the world. And of course, the blues that's one of them. So
Yeah.
great comment.
I think that pretty much takes us through, and we're right at 5 o'clock, and want to be
Okay.
respectful of everyone's time. So, thank you so much. What a fabulous, interesting, intriguing presentation, and we hope that you'll keep working on this and come back and tell us more. And it sounds like you really spurred the interest of a lot of folks out there that may have access to these collections.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I just love to share this and I hope to get some feedback. So thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Marilyn. We hope to see you soon. Come visit us.
Okay. All right. Take care. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.